Egypt had fallen. The greatest civilization on earth was dying. Then warriors from the south did the impossible. They conquered Egypt. And then they saved it. The year is 730 BCE. Egypt is a shadow of its former glory. The great temples of Karnak crumble. The priests weep. Foreign warlords have carved the sacred land into petty kingdoms. For 3 centuries, chaos has reigned. But far to the south, beyond the cataracts of the Nile, a kingdom watches. And waits. The Kushites have spent generations absorbing Egyptian culture. They worship Ammonius Ra with a devotion Egypt has forgotten. They see themselves not as conquerors but as the true inheritors of pharaonic tradition. And their king, Piye, believes the gods have chosen him for a sacred mission. What happened next would shock the ancient world. But here is the question nobody asks. Why did Egypt welcome its conquerors? Piye was unlike any conqueror history had ever seen. When he marched north with his army, he did not come to destroy. He came to purify. His soldiers were forbidden from entering battle without ritual cleansing. Every city they approached received the same message. Submit to the true servant of Ammonius. The response stunned everyone. City after city opened its gates. Egyptian priests declared Piye a liberator. If this is already changing what you thought you knew, drop a like. The Nubians were not seen as foreigners. They were seen as Egypt's most faithful children returning home. Piye reached Memphis, the ancient capital, and faced his greatest test. The city resisted. What Piye did next revealed his true character. And it explains everything about why this dynasty would build more pyramids than any before them. But let me stop here. Because what you are about to hear changes everything. Piye captured Memphis. He could have slaughtered its defenders. Instead, he walked directly to the temple of Ptah. He performed the sacred rituals himself. He demonstrated that he knew Egyptian religion better than the Egyptians. The city's priests proclaimed him the rightful pharaoh. Piye then did something extraordinary. He invited the defeated northern kings to a feast of reconciliation. They came. But Piye refused to eat with most of them. Why? Because they ate fish. They were ritually impure. Think about that for a second. The conqueror was more religiously devoted than the conquered. This was not a foreign invasion. This was a religious restoration. And the Egyptian people knew it. The 25th dynasty had begun. But this was just the setup. Piye returned to Nubia after his conquest, content to rule from afar. It was his successors who would transform Egypt forever. His brother Shabaka moved the royal court to Memphis. For the first time in centuries, Egypt was unified under a single ruler. But that was not even the impressive part. The Nubian pharaohs launched the greatest building program Egypt had seen in 500 years. Temples that had crumbled were restored stone by stone. New monuments rose across the land. At Karnak, they added structures that still stand today. They copied ancient texts that would have been lost forever. They saw themselves as museum curators saving a dying civilization. And they succeeded beyond anyone's imagination. Now here is where the story takes its darkest turn. Subscribe if you want to see how this ends. The greatest Nubian pharaoh was about to face the greatest threat the ancient world had ever known. Taharqa came to power in 690 BCE. He was brilliant. He was ambitious. He built more pyramids than any pharaoh before him. And he made a fatal mistake. To the east, the Assyrian Empire was consuming everything in its path. The most brutal military machine ever assembled. When Taharqa supported a rebellion against Assyria, he triggered a chain of events that would doom his dynasty. The Assyrians invaded Egypt with an army unlike anything the ancient world had seen. Iron weapons. Siege engines. Professional soldiers who knew no mercy. What would you have done? The Battle of Eltekeh in 7. 101 BCE was the first clash between Nubia and Assyria. The result was unclear. Both sides claimed victory. But the Assyrian king Sennacherib withdrew. Egypt survived. For now. Drop your prediction in the comments. Do you think Nubia could hold Egypt? 20 years later, the Assyrians returned. This time under Esarhaddon. This time with vengeance. Taharqa fought brilliantly. He won battles. He inspired his people. But the Assyrians kept coming. In 671 BCE, Memphis fell. Taharqa fled south. The Assyrians installed puppet rulers in the delta. And then it got worse. Esarhaddon died, but his son Ashurbanipal finished the conquest. In 664 BCE, Assyrian forces reached Thebes. What they did there shocked the ancient world. Thebes was sacked. Treasures accumulated over 2,000 years were carried off to Nineveh. The violation was so complete that the prophet Nahum referenced it in the Bible decades later. I want you to remember this part. The Nubian dynasty was finished in Egypt. But not in Nubia itself. Tantamani, the last Nubian pharaoh of Egypt, retreated to his homeland. And here is what nobody talks about. The kingdom of Kush survived for another 1,000 years. They built 200 pyramids at Meroe. They developed their own writing system. They traded with Rome. They remained a powerful civilization until the 4th century CE. The 25th dynasty lasted only 100 years in Egypt. But their legacy of preservation saved Egyptian civilization from complete collapse. They were forgotten because history was written by others. Today, archaeologists are rewriting this chapter of history. The pyramids of Sudan number more than those in Egypt. The Nubian pharaohs preserved texts and temples that would otherwise be lost forever. They remind us that civilization flows in unexpected directions. The Kushites looked at a dying Egypt and saw something worth saving. They conquered not to destroy but to restore. They failed to hold Egypt against the Assyrian onslaught. But they kept their own kingdom alive for a millennium afterward. Perhaps that is the real lesson here. The greatest empires are not always the ones that conquer the most. Sometimes they are the ones that preserve the most. The 25th dynasty is no longer forgotten.